Hello and blessings to you. In this video we're going to go after chapters 7 and 8. So let's start out actually over here. So you've already learned some of the verbs in the perfect tense, just the simple verb. Before we move on, I want to point out something to you about these verbs. So there are 7 verb patterns in Hebrew. Today we're going to only be talking about the kal, or simple is what kal means, the simple verb. The rest of the verbs, the names are based on the verb pay, ayin, lamed. Sorry for that writing. But you can see here's that pay. The ayin doesn't really transliterate in English, and then there's a lamed. So pay, ayin, lamed, pay, ayin, lamed, pay, ayin, lamed, pay, ayin, lamed, on and on like that. And in English, these other letters, so for instance, this hey right here, kind of point to the different augmentations that those verbs receive as they go into different patterns. So I think our book calls the kal the pa'al, which is another name for it. So again, pay, ayin, lamed. Pa'al is the same as the kal. And I don't need you to memorize all of these at the moment. I just want to kind of give you an overview so you're familiar moving forward. Sound good? Well, so the kal is in the active voice, and it's a simple kind of pattern. It's not augmented by anything else. Okay? So, for instance, we have a verb in this chapter, akal just means eat. So akal would be he ate. There's no different augmentations to the meaning of this verb. Okay, but it could also be in the nifl. And in nifl, the verb can either be passive or reflexive. So we have the kal and the nifl. But in Hebrew, this is pretty different. There's not really something like this in English. But a verb can have a causative meaning behind it. So if we add this hey and follow the vowel patterns of the hifl, we could make, for instance, we could make this mean he caused someone else to eat. So kind of a different thing there. A good example of this is in the Aaronic or priestly blessing, which is Yeverekeka Adonai v'yishmereka, Ya'er Adonai panav aleka v'chunika, Yisa Adonai panav aleka v'yasem leka shalom. In English, that is, may the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord cause his face to shine upon you and be gracious to you. May the Lord cause his face to turn towards you and give you peace. So that's what that causative action sounds like. So in English, sometimes we'll actually say cause, but sometimes the word will have a separate meaning because it's causative. So we'll get to that in later chapters. No need to memorize it now. Again, just for now, we're trying to be familiar with these kinds of things. The last sort of section is intensive action. So in this example, if a call was in the PL, it would mean he really ate. So it's again kind of a funny thing in English, but so it intensifies whatever this action is. And for all 3 of those examples, I did just go through the active voice. So we also have a passive and reflexive possibility for those, except you can see there is no reflexive causative. You can't cause yourself to eat. I mean, that would kind of just be the same as the kal. All right? So just to reiterate one more time, I don't need you to memorize all of this. I'm just bringing it to your attention so as we move forward, you'll kind of have this chart in the back of your head. Sound good? Well, let's go over the vocab. So here we have aleph, kaf, lamed for eat. So akal, he ate. Ayin mem resh, say. Amar would be he said. Anachnu, we. And notice we can be masculine or feminine, and it's the plural form. And we'll talk about that a little more in a second. Ani, anoki. So both of these are the same words, even though they're spelled a little differently. I guess you could think of ani as an abbreviated form of anoki, and that just means I. At is you, and it's feminine. Ata, you, masculine, singular for both of those. Atim, you, masculine plural. Atin, you, feminine plural. Yod, sheen, bait. Yashav would be he sat. It could mean sit, settle, or reside. Lo means no or not. It's what we'll use to have negative forms of verbs. Lachem means bread or food. You actually already know this word because of Bethlehem. Bet lechem, house of bread. Lechem is bread or food. Lifnei, notice there's no dagesh lene here in the pay, so that's an F sound. Lifnei, before, in front of. Literally, this means this is that inseparable preposition, the lamed. This means to the face of. So literally, that's what it means. But then we kind of take a more of a colloquial track with it, and if it's to the face of something, it means it's before it or in front of it. Lamed kof chet means take. Lakach would be he took. All, upon, about, on, over. So this is one of those makef prepositions, so you'll often see it like this. So all hamelech would be upon the king. So kind of a weird example, but okay. Well, let's move on a little bit. So here are the prepositions you already know, and I'm going to remind you of that mnemonic device again. Who is he is she, and then me is who. So you already know who and he. You already know haim and haima are they, the masculine forms. And again, you can just think of this as an abbreviated form of haima. And then heina is the feminine. Alright? Well, let's put this into a chart now. Okay? So you already know basically, I guess just the third person is all we've learned up to this point. But now we have some vocabulary word for the first person, for both singular and plural, and the second person, singular, plural, masculine, and feminine. Okay? It probably would be a very good idea to memorize this chart. And you'll see why as we move on to the cal or the pa'al pattern, the perfect pattern, in a second. But so let's go through this anyways. We'll go ani, anoki is I, ata, you masculine, at, you feminine, who is he is she, anachnu is we, atem, you masculine plural, aten, you feminine plural, haim, haima is they, and it's the masculine form, and heina is they, feminine form. So I'm sure you guys have your own mnemonic devices, and I encourage you to develop those to help you remember all of these words. But every once in a while I'll share with you some of my mnemonic devices as well. So for heina, to me this is a lot like the word henna, so Henna, which is kind of a it's it's a dye for your skin, used in India to draw patterns. My wife really loves this stuff, and she's very good at drawing henna designs on other people's hands, and she does it to her own hands too. Um, but so that just helps me remember that henna is the feminine form. So creating associations like that will help you memorize these words. So I encourage you to find your own things that help you remember what each of these mean. And if you find one that's very helpful, share it with the class and maybe we'll all benefit from it. Well, let's keep going. Um, so the author just wants to point out that both I and we could be masculine or feminine, so there's no gender in these two, which makes sense. In English, when we say I, a boy could be talking, a girl could be talking, there's no gender with that. And the same thing for we. So a lot like English there. Now, in English, though, it is different for you. In fact, in English, you can be masculine, feminine, or plural. So in English, this is very confusing. So in the South, that's why they'll say things like y'all, or in the North, maybe you guys. I'm not sure what they say specifically in your area, but so in English, we have really no distinction with that. In Hebrew, though, there is for each of those. There's a masculine singular, ata, a feminine singular, at, a masculine plural, atim, and a feminine plural, atin. So just be aware of that, and of course you'll have to know that if you memorize this chart. But let's go on now. So here we have the perfect tense. So remember there's perfect and imperfect, and that's tenses, of the pa'al pattern. So bring this up again. Remember, most of the time you'll see this called the cal, and cal again just means simple. So cal. Pa'al is another way of talking about this. And you can see that that's taken, so it's the verb pay, ayin, lamed, with just the pattern you've already learned for the third masculine singular. In Hebrew, this is like the default pattern. So in a lot of grammars, you'll see this form will be at the beginning of the paradigm. This author, I think for the most part, I guess we'll see moving forward, but I think for the most part, this author prefers to do it like we do in English, with starting first, then second, and then third, and then the plural over there. So typically, though, most grammars will start out with a 3ms because this is like the default Hebrew form. So as the default, that's what it's named after. So here you see that 3ms, comets, patak, nothing else augmenting the word at all. So pa'al. So it's the pa'al pattern. Okay, so you've already learned some of this. Oh, well, here it is right there. I guess I could have pointed to that. But so you've already learned hu shamar, he guarded, he shamra, she guarded, haim shamru or haima shamru is they guarded in masculine. And maybe a good way, sorry, I just thought of another way to maybe help you remember. The masculine form has a mem right here and right here. So masculine mem. Maybe that will help you remember. And then Heina Shamru, they guarded. And again, pointing out, although there's different pronouns, if you just have the verb itself, it's the exact same for the masculine, feminine, plural, third plural, to be precise. Well, so moving along, let's see what else you need to know from this. Okay, now the author gives us the full chart, okay? So here we have the first, the second, third, Over here is the plural, over here is the singular. And then we'll have the masculine above the feminine in all of these cases. But so here we have shamarti would mean I guarded. Shamarta, you guarded. And notice this shava is silent. So is this one. So this is a silent, not a vocal shema. So we have shamarti, shamarta, shamart, shamar, shamra. So here's a silent shava right there. Shamra, she guarded. Shamarnu, again, silent shava, we guarded. Shamartim, silent. Shamarten, again, silent. Shamru, they guarded. Shamru. So notice, there are a lot of silent shavas. Okay? So for the moment, I don't need you to memorize specifically for shamar, but we are going to memorize this chart, okay? And you can really do that in conjunction with memorizing this chart, as we'll see below, I think. So here we go. This puts those pronouns in front of that verb. So here we have ani shamarti or anoki shamarti. And notice, I think it's helpful that I think he points out that they rhyme. Yep, right there. And by rhyme, he just means it has the same ending. That's not true for all of them, but some of them do, and that should help you remember. So hirik yod is typically going to be a first-person singular ending. Same thing, noon shurik is typically going to be a first-person plural ending. So nu. So here we have ani or anoki is shamarti, I guarded. Ata shamarta, you masculine, guarded. At shamart, you feminine, guarded. Hu shamar, he guarded. He shamra, she guarded. Anachnu shamarnu, we guarded. Atim shamartim, you masculine plural, guarded. Atin shamartin, you feminine plural, guarded. Haim shamru or hema shamru is they guarded. Heina shamru is they feminine guarded. So notice again, not all of them rhyme, but some of them do, and that's helpful. So let me just kind of highlight the ones that do. The first person singular, second masculine singular, second feminine singular, first plural, second masculine plural, and second feminine plural. I mean, so this is like 60% of our paradigm here does match. And so for that reason, it's probably going to be very helpful for you if you'll kind of memorize these together. I mean together but separately, because you're not always going to see it with the pronoun here, and sometimes you'll see the pronoun without a verb. And so for those reasons, you do need to know them apart, but it might help you if you memorize these separately. Okay? Now, the author just kind of wants to point out any verb root that we've introduced so far. So not every verb in Hebrew has this attested, and attested is the fancy word meaning it's in, like we have a written copy of it from ancient Hebrew. So not all verbs are attested in the kal or pa'al stem, but the ones so far that we've introduced, the ones that you've memorized for your vocabulary, all do have a kal stem, and so they can all fit into this pattern. Now, even though they can all fit in this pattern, some verbs change the pattern just a little bit. Okay? Typically, we're going to call these weak verbs. Like, there's something about them that makes them not able to take the normal pattern. One way that a verb could be weak is because they have a guttural letter in them. So if you remember, gutturals cannot really take things like dageshes. They can't take a vocal shava. Instead, you have to have like a hatef vowel of some sort. So gutturals are some of our weak letters, and because of that, they make verbs weak. Okay? So you're not going to have to memorize the guttural forms. Okay? Just be aware that it will have spelling differences. And this is probably for now. In future chapters, we will go over in depth some of these. Well, we'll get to that in later chapters. Okay? Just for now, be aware that there are weak verbs. Now, with that being said, I kind of alluded to this earlier, and I think we have talked about this in class before. But so when I say amadti, this could mean I stood all on its own, okay? It doesn't actually need the ani amadti or noki amadti. Because it has this ending, you already know it means I stood. So you'll find both like this and with the pronoun. So just be aware and ready to translate either one. Okay? Just for practice, let's kind of go through all of these. Okay? So we have amadti, I stood. Zakarti, I remembered. Halakti, I walked or I went. Amarti, I said. Lakhakti, I took. Malakti, I ruled. Okay? Alright, well let's talk about one last thing in chapter 7, and that's how to make sentences negative. And by negative, we'll introduce the word no or not. Okay? So in English, we might say Abraham went to the city, or Abraham did not go to the city. Now remember, in the perfect tense, we could translate this as Abraham did go to the city, and so that's what they're doing in the second case. So remember, we have some flexibility with the perfect tense. So Abraham did go to the city, Abraham did not go to the city. So in English, that's how we negate things, is with not. In Hebrew, we have Abraham halak el ha'ir. So Abraham went to the city. We can then negate it by adding the word lo. Abraham lo halak el ha'ir. Abraham did not walk or go to the city. Right? Another example. Amadnu baderek. So we stood on the road. Okay? So there's a lot going into this sentence, but we've already learned it all, so hopefully you're tracking with me. So let's break it down just a little bit before we move on to the negative. So amadnu, so this is ayin, mem, dalet, to stand, and it's that first plural, first common plural, so amadnu, we stood. Ba, the inseparable pronoun, with a patak, and that patak in the dagesh lets you know that this is also definite. So this is in the road. So we stood in the road. Okay? To negate that, you could just say, Lo amadnu baderek. We did not stand in the road. Okay? Well, let's move on to chapter 8. So we have some more vocabulary here. Asher could mean that, which, who, or where. It can actually mean a lot more things, but for now, we'll just take it as the book gives it to us. So that, which, who, where, asher. Bain could mean between or among. Hey, yod, hey. is our to be verb. So haya would be he was. Ma, meh could mean what or how. Mayim means water. So if you remember when we talked about the dual form, that's what this is actually. So this patak, yod, hirik, mem, this is that dual ending. So technically this might mean something like two waters, but it's just always going to be translated like that. So just water works just fine. The author also wants to point out that this word is a collective noun. And so what that means is one can stand in for a lot of stuff. So in English, water is also a collective noun. It's kind of uncommon for us to say waters. Now, it's not unheard of, but it's just uncommon. And the author also wants to point out whenever you only see one form, that's typically going to mean it's going to be a collective noun. Okay? And that's just the way that this author is presenting the text. Make sense? Hope so. Okay, moving on. We have milchama, milchamot, so singular, plural. This means war or battle, and it's a feminine word. You can tell because of this ending right here and this plural ending right there. Okay. Mishpat, mishpatim is judgment, law, or justice. Ad, until, as far as. Im, with. Both of these are going to be those makef prepositions. So you'll have that kind of similar to an English dash. Remember, that's called a makef. It's kind of hard to write. I'm on my desktop computer. But there we go. That's what these are your makef. So these are makef prepositions kind of attached to the next word. We have ayin, sin, hey, means to do or to make. So we might say asa, he made, or he did. Kol is voice, sound, or noise is another word this could mean. Kol. Resh, aleph, hey, ra'ah could mean see. So ra'ah would mean he saw. Sha'ar, sha'arim, so singular, plural. This means gate. Sade, sadot, field. And notice here with sadot, even though it's masculine, it takes that feminine ending. Okay, so just be aware, this is a masculine word. Okay, let's move on to the direct object. So we've talked about this several times now, but so we'll just go really fast over it. These two words alone can make a sentence. Hamelech zakar, the king remembered. You could also just have one word if it's a verb with those endings. So we have shamarti, I guarded, amadti, sorry, you stood. Okay, so these are all sentences, complete sentences, because they're complete thoughts. Now, we can make those sentences more complex by adding what's called an object. Okay, so what did the king remember? What did I guard? Maybe where did you stand? So we can make those sentences more complex. So if we say Hamelech zakar bain, it's the king remembered a son. So notice it's not definite. Shamarti derek, I guarded a road. Okay, in those examples, bain, a son, and derek, a road, are called the direct objects because they take the action of whatever the verb is. Okay, so just I guess the author is taking some time for you to remember the difference between definite and indefinite. I don't think right now I'll go over this with you. I hope that you already are familiar with these. So let's kind of move down just a little bit. So the direct object of a sentence can be definite by having that hey, or indefinite by not having that as a prefix. Okay, or if it's just a word that already is definite by nature, such as proper nouns. Okay, the reason that's important is because we had a direct object marker in Hebrew. Okay, let's see if they actually say that. No, but so this is what that's going to be called, is a direct object, and it's taking a while, so I'm just going to abbreviate, marker. Okay, the direct object marker is et. You might also see it as 8. So it could be et or it could be 8. All right? Now this verb is not translated, okay? There is no translation in English. So when you see this word, again, there's no English equivalent to it. So there's nothing that you would translate it as. But what it does is it marks that the word that follows it is going to be the direct object. Now, this only happens when the word following it is definite. Okay? So here are some examples of this. Hamelech zakar bain. So this is indefinite because bain is not definite, is what we're looking at in this case. Hamelech zakar et habain. So when bain becomes definite with the article here, then we can put et in front of it. All right? So here we go again. Shalakta lachem larushalayim. Okay? This is you, masculine, sent bread to Jerusalem. Shalakta et halachem larushalayim. You sent the bread to Jerusalem. And notice, I didn't translate this at all. Okay? One last example. Hu shamar et Yerushalayim. He guarded Jerusalem. I said one last example. I assume this was in pairs like the rest. Haim zakru et Abraham. They remembered Abraham. All right? So right now, you might wonder, why do we even need this? Well, these are just very simple sentences. As we get into more complex sentences, it's going to be very useful to know what the direct object is. Okay, it's really going to help with the context of how to translate a particular verse. Now, before we go on anymore, I do want to point out that this et is exactly identical to another et. This et means with or together with. So technically, this last sentence, I could say they guarded with Abraham. Or I'm sorry, that's not guarded, that's remembered. They remembered with Abraham. So the only way you're going to be able to distinguish these are by context. And generally, it's going to be pretty easy. But just be aware that et can also mean with. And I think that's already a vocab word that you've had. And if not, we'll have it soon, I'm sure. So, okay. A couple things here. If the sentence has more than one definite direct object, the word et precedes each one. Okay? So Abraham shalach et ha'ish va'et ha'isha va'et hana'ar la'ir. Alright? Abraham sent the man and the woman and the young man to the city. So we have that et each time, that there's a direct object that's definite. And I'd say, from my experience, I feel like most of the time direct objects will be definite and will have this et. I mean, at the very least, this is a very common thing. So that's why we're going over it. Okay. Okay. Actually, here we're getting into why it's important to know this direct object marker, okay? Because remember, sentences in Hebrew can appear in any order. So the et will help us understand what's really going on in a sentence. So kind of an easy version might be Ha'av shamar et hana'ar. So the father guarded the son, okay? But it's just as plausible to have et hana'ar shamar ha'av. So if we didn't have this et, it would just look like the young man guarded the father. But this et points out that no, this is the object. So the father guarded the son. Okay? David zakar et Abraham. David remembered Abraham. Et Abraham zakar David. So Abraham, so kind of if you're going for like a word order translation, you could say Abraham is what David remembered, but really it's just David remembered Abraham. Okay? Okay, so in chapter 7, we went over that perfect tense. We kind of alluded to the 5 gutturals, though, making changes happen. So some of the verbs that have been introduced in chapter 8 end with a hey, one of those gutturals. All right? Specifically in this example, these 3 words have a slight change to the pattern, okay? And it's because hey is a weak letter. And actually, let me scooch this over just a little bit. Hey is a weak letter, and because of that, we have a specific pattern of weak verbs called third hey. So this might be how you see it. This is Roman numeral for 3, so third hey. And that's saying 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So the third root letter is a hey. When that happens, our paradigm shifts just a little bit. There are changes that happen. And you will need to memorize this, especially for haya, hey, yod, hey, because this is such a common verb, okay? So you'll need to memorize those shifts. So let's go over that really fast. So normally we'll have shamati. With haya we'll have hayiti. So notice this is a hiric yod. This yod is not verbalized. Hayiti. This hey just dropped out. It's gone. And really specifically it dropped out because of this hiric yod, but or at least in tandem with that. Okay, next one. Shamarta hayita. So again, that third hey has dropped out. Shamart hayit. No third hey. Shamar haya. So here we have one that has it. Shamra haita. Okay, notice that that third hey did drop out, but it kind of was replaced by this tav. Okay, haita. Okay, shamarnu hayinu. So again, third hey is dropped out. Shamartem, hayitem. Again, third hey is dropped out. But notice the endings are still there for you. So really, the important thing is to be able to recognize from these words that this is the verb haya, hey yod hey. Okay? Hayiten, shamarten. Hayu, shamru, sorry. Shamru, hayu. Okay? So go ahead, you will need to memorize this, okay? So these verbs, Resh Aleph Hey and Ayin Sin Hey, are very similar, but not exactly identical to Hey Yod Hey. And I won't make you memorize those ones because, well, definitely be familiar with them, okay? I mean, again, the big thing is be able to recognize them, okay? Recognize that generally that Hey's going to drop out, and that, so you'll need to rely on this Resh Aleph and Ayin Sin, okay? So for the exact spelling of these verbs, one nice thing about this book is there is a chart at the back of all of our verbs. So if you are curious and want to go through these, go to page 373. Okay, we're not going to do that right now, we'll just move on. So we're going to talk about some special uses of the things we've just talked about. So haya, hey yod hey, does not take a direct object. Okay, so we're not going to have he was the man or something like that. Okay, I mean we can, sorry, we can have that, but it's not going to have the direct object in it. Okay, so here we have hu ra'ah et ha'ish. So here's that ra'ah. So notice in this form it's basically the same as what you might have memorized for the 3MS, like shamar, but notice there is a comets here instead of the patak that you might normally expect. Okay, but that hey is still there, so great. This is good. So hu ra'ah et ha'ish. He saw the man. Hu haya ha'ish. He was the man. Notice there's no direct object marker there. I guess we'll do these examples as well. Hamelech zakar et Abraham. The king remembered Abraham. So there's that direct object marker. So we know it's Abraham that the king is remembering. Hamelech haya Abraham. The king was Abraham. No direct object marker. Okay? Sometimes the direct object marker et will be followed by asher. And when that happens, so remember what asher means up here. That, which, who, or where. When that happens, it could mean that which, like just together, that which, or it could even mean what. So here's an example of what that is. Zakarti et asher ashiti, or sorry, asiti, it's a scene. So I remembered that which I did, or I made. Okay, so this is a special use. So just, you'll need to keep this in the back of your mind that if you come across this sentence and you're trying to translate it and it doesn't quite make sense, just remember that you could go that which or what. So let's pretend like we forgot about this rule. I remembered that I did. I remembered that I did. Well, that doesn't really make sense. Maybe, oh yeah, maybe it could mean what. Et asher. I remember what I did. Okay? So just kind of keep that in your back pocket ready to use. Okay, similarly, we have ad asher. So this is an idiom or a colloquial phrase. So it doesn't, if you were to just translate this, you might say until what or until that. but that doesn't necessarily make sense. Like in this example, I walked until that I saw a man doesn't really make sense in English. And so that's why this is an idiom. And so when you see this, even though odd by itself can just mean until or as far as, when you see this, you'll also just translate it until. So same thing as up here, just kind of keep this in your back pocket. If you are translating and something doesn't make sense, remember this asher can kind of do some funny things sometimes, and so ad asher just means until. So let's translate this. Halakti ad asher ra'iti et ha'ish. So I walked until I saw the man. Okay? A couple more things and then we'll be done with this chapter. So the verb hey yod hey is used very much like in English, the verb to be. Okay? So here we have ha'ish haya al hahar. The man was on the mountain. Here we have hayu ha'anashim avadim. So they were the men, so then the men were slaves. The men were slaves. Okay? So additionally, this verb can also be translated as there was or there were. Okay? So haya ish ba'ir, instead of men were in the city, which also makes sense, that's a fair translation, you could just say there were men in the city. Okay? Next one. Hayu anashim ba'ir. This could mean, this could be the people were in the city, but it could also just mean there were people in the city. Okay? Just like with our other verbs, lo can negate this. So we could say, ish lo haya ba'ir. A man was not in the city. Or we could even say, there was not a man in the city. Okay? Alright, so in this chapter we have this vocab word bain. Could mean between or among. It's one of those makef prepositions. So bain, when it's used in pairs, so when you have two things, that's when it means between. Okay? And from context, this should be pretty easy to distinguish between. And I mean, worst comes to worst, try one definition. If it doesn't make sense, try the other. But so let's kind of see what the author is talking about here. Hamelech halak bain hanashim. The king walked. Let's first start out with between the women. I mean, that kind of makes sense. But maybe a little more sense would be the king walked among the women. Okay? The king walked between the women and between the children. Alright? In that sense, between definitely is the preferred one. It doesn't make sense to say the king walked among the women and among the children. It's probably saying between. And you can see in English these words are very close anyways. It's just kind of a nuance more than anything. Ha'ish amad bain isha ubain ha-behemot. So the man stood between the woman and between the cattle, or the animals. Okay. Last thing, just really fast, we'll talk about how we translate things. Okay. Honestly, what I would kind of maybe prefer at this point at least is go ahead and do a word for word and then do a better English. Alright? But honestly, I'm not going to be too hard on you if you pick one or the other as a starting point at least. Okay? Although I would at least prefer that you know what the word for word is, so you can kind of get the sense, a little better of a sense of what the sentence is saying in English, like in the actual Hebrew. So here we have Ha'ish Amad Bain Haharim Uvein Ha'ir. So literally, we have the man stood between the mountains and between the city. Now, that's perfectly fine to say in English, but to maybe giving a translation makes it a little easier on your readers to say, to actually just leave out this second bane, still keep that vav, and have the man stood between the mountains and the city. In English, we don't need both of these banes. Okay, but again, either one's fine. I at least want you to be able to recognize word for word, but if you gave me this translation, still it'd kind of be obvious that you knew the word for word because you cut out this word. So, as we translate in class, either one's fine. Let's go through some more examples though, and then we'll call it the end. So, halakti el habayit asher yashavti sham. So this is I walked to the house which, or where, probably might be better, where I, let's say where I dwelt, I guess because it's going to be perfect here, where I dwelt there. I guess he's saying resided, where I resided there. Now in English, this last there doesn't really make sense. You don't need that there. So in English, we might instead say, I walked to the house where I resided. You don't need this. So again, if you leave this off as a translation, it's perfectly fine. In class, though, I might ask you, okay, what's that last word? And then you'll tell me there, and you'll explain you left it off for English, or something like that, which is all perfectly fine. Okay, last one. Lo hayu nashim basade. So this is there were no women in the field. Well, okay, sorry. I guess I kind of jumped to the better translation. Literally, this is no were women in the field. So in English, that doesn't make any sense. No were women in the field. So that's how we know to kind of switch those words around and say, there were no women in the field. Okay, so moving forward, really kind of expect to be able to give both. Give me word for word, give me the better English. If your word for word is your first step, that's awesome, and then you can go to better English from there. If you go straight to better English, sometimes I might ask you for the word for word just to see, make sure you're tracking everything. But for now, I think that's it for the day. So blessings to you. Thanks.